While for the longest time, Indian hip hop used to represent this. Lately, it's taken on a very different shape. Now, this is no knock on the honey sings of this country. They make infectious party music that I'm sure many of you are guilty of enjoying. However, it is worth examining how and why the Indian hip hop industry, particularly the independent one, has very organically shifted from the hedonism that many a boomer critiques modern rap for towards a more conscious and almost revolutionary style. Hip hop's most powerful element is not the beats the genre produces, nor the rhymes the rappers devise, but rather the inspiration behind their work. You see, hip hop was born from the downtrodden. It gave a voice to those who were unheard and allowed them to speak against the power that held them back. The genre's global success can be almost directly attributed to this reason, that ideas and instances of revolution and oppression extend beyond their domestic realm. Essentially then, the kind of hip-hop growing in India today is inspired not for the commercial opportunities that the genre holds over popular music, but rather because the medium itself becomes the best outlet for expression against those in power. But first, let's examine the plausibility of the claim that revolution and oppression are capable of instilling a sense of connection across borders and communities. George Lawson, professor of international relations at LSE, in his paper Revolution in the International, posits that the tangible domestic effects of a revolution are not the only metric through which they should be considered. Rather, he advocates for an intersocietal approach to understand their international or cross-border effects. He cites the example of the Haitian Rebellion as being intrinsically tied to the French Revolution. The ideas of the French Revolution, that of liberty, equality, and fraternity, were antithetical to the conditions that the Haitians were in and inspired them and gave them cause to resist and rebel. The Iranian Revolution of '79 had protesters wearing Guevara shirts, a now globally recognized symbol of resistance. The fall of Gorbachev in Soviet Russia also coincided with the fall of communism in Central and Eastern Europe. All of this highlights that this simple notion of oppressor and oppressed is never entirely particular to one scenario. It inevitably inspires connections for those in similar circumstances. The rise of this conscious hip-hop in India can then be evidentially traced back to the conditions that the artists find themselves in. The growth of a regime, but more importantly, the ideology behind it, which has sought to curb social liberties and target minorities, has laid the groundwork for this kind of hip-hop to emerge. Early signs of it could be found in Kashmiri rapper MC Kash's 2010 track, I Protest. While the rest of the country is seemingly now waking up to governmental repression, Kashmir was afflicted by it long before the BJP, and hence it is perhaps unsurprising that this form of hip-hop first emerged there. The Citizenship Amendment Act saw a wave of protest music emerge, and while genres like folk were undoubtedly important, hip-hop has a certain fire to it that sets it apart. Independent artists like Amer, Anu Mankind,
would you believe where I'm from? My people do not have the time to grieve. Focus on
Madara, are all at the forefront of this movement. These artists are increasingly bold, speaking their truth to those in power and embracing hip-hop in its arguably purest form. While they have achieved moderate success, none of these artists have quite broken out amongst the Indian populace in the way an Hemingway has. When NWA first began to question the situation they found themselves in, they were equal parts controversial and successful. The current independent hip-hop scene, while commendable, resides in a very niche space. But if the current global protests have shown us anything, all it takes is a single moment for change to be inspired. And no matter the origin of the oppressor, you can be assured that hip-hop will fight for the oppressed. Just 2 years ago, a song from Thailand simply titled Rap Against Dictatorship exploded on the internet with 80 million views on YouTube alone. While we may not have found it yet, India's anthem for revolution is being concocted by a dynamic and creative independent industry fueled by a desire to dissent against a perceived and possibly literal repressive state.